I'm Tim, the Brand Weaver, and this is Branding for Breweries, the podcast that helps you grow your brewery, build a better brand, and connect with more drinkers. Each week, I'm joined by the brightest minds in the beer world, sharing practical tips to help your brewery stand out and sell more beer. Let's get stuck in. What up, 24-hour party people? 'Tis I, Tim the Brand Weaver, and as always, you are listening or potentially watching to Branding for Breweries, the show that brings you the brightest, potentially most attractive minds in the beer industry to your earballs and eyeballs for the benefit of your brewery, doing amazing things, growing, and generally being awesome. And today is no exception, as I welcome back a return guest, Mr. Andrew Morgan. But today we are delving deep into something which is quite an interesting topic. And these are the rules, regulations, and limitations that impact your brewery. Now, I appreciate when I say rules, regulations, and impact, that sounds as dull as dishwater. But Andrew is deep in the weeds of all of this compliance muck and with Rollies right now, which is, of course, a beer brand. So I figured Andrew would come in, we'd have a chin wag, and we can give you some insight that will help you navigate these murky waters. That's enough of me rambling. Let's get Andrew in. Andrew, sir, good morning.
Hello, how are we doing?
I am super funky fresh, thank you, sir. How are you getting on today?
Yeah, good. It feels, we're not going to talk about the weather, right? But a bit of sun would be nice. But no, all in all, I can't complain. It's nice to be back on the show, and a really interesting topic. As you said, really geeky, but actually, I think quite fun in its own way, and something that a lot of people don't. Consumers and breweries don't really think about. It's all regulated, it's all there, but actually navigating it, you'd be surprised at how many people can get tripped up by some basic bits and bobs.
Dude, I think this is a prime example of you don't know what you don't know, right? And so let us lift the veil on these mysteries, these pitfalls that breweries might fall into, and maybe chat about some of the fun or frustrating stories for some of those breweries as well. Where do we begin?
I suppose we could talk about Rollies, because that's quite interesting in terms of a modern thing that I'm working on, and actually it's quite a good sort of case study for something quite new and innovative. And I think one of the challenges we talked about when we were setting this up was innovation in beer, and I'm a big believer in innovation and the idea that we should really we need to do new things, right? We can't just keep on doing the same as before. So with Rollies, Stuart Rowley, he came up with what's called smart brew technology. So it's genuinely a way to change the fermentation that causes the beer to have lower calories, have zero sugars, lower carbs, and has B vitamins in the beer. So when you're drinking it, your liver's being topped up, and essentially you can wake up the following morning feeling better than you would do otherwise. So, being brought into this, it was like, well, this is amazing. We can, but then I quickly said, yeah, but we can't talk about hangovers, right? And it's like, what do you mean we can't talk about hangovers? Well, we're a responsible brewer. So if we talk about hangovers, then we're implying that people will overconsume to the point where hangovers will be a thing. So rule 101 of the Portman Group and ASA is you mustn't promote irresponsible consumption. So Rollies falls categorically into that, in terms of we can't talk about hangovers. But the B vitamins, the reality is, and scientifically, those B vitamins are brilliant at ensuring your liver remains at full normal health, and alcohol generally is a problem for that, and also your head. It really helps with your cognitive behavior. So from a non-marketing point of view, if we were using sort of layman's terms, it's a beer that's, again, we can't even use the phrase better for you. It's not. So again, that's one we can't use. So the challenge was, what language can we use? How can we present a beer that's lower calories? Actually won gold at the World Beer Awards as well. I forgot to mention that. So in terms of the smart brew technology, it preserves the quality of the beer. So that the beer is won gold at the World Beer Awards and voted best lager brewed in the UK by a very prestigious award. So the beer is brilliant. I mean, the great thing for me, beer is brilliant, but we've got to tackle how to present lower calories and present B vitamins in it.
So you touched on a few things there then. So we've got the pitfalls of you can't promote excessive drinking, tick. You can't say that beer is basically healthy for you.
No. Or healthier or better for you, or have any even vaguely health related connection.
And we know from, well, I've experienced and seen in the past, obviously your can artwork can't be too child appealing, I suppose. I don't even know if that's the right
Yeah,
word.
children. I mean, that's the big one, is under 18s. So again, you know, skipping around a bit, but the irony of, you know, beer being so you know, the challenge 25 and all the rules around the dispense and supply of alcohol means that children can't get it. I mean, it's not like, you know, back in the day where you could find a friendly pub who'd serve you as a 15-year-old. Not to say that ever necessarily happened, but I think some people may say it did happen back in the day. It's not going to happen now with digital ID and stuff. There's no way. So you've got a watertight situation where alcohol's not going to be in the hands of children. So it's only for adults, and yet you can't have any imagery that may appeal to those under 18.
So
Which is bonkers, right? I mean, it's a little bit weird, you know. And poor old Tiny Rebel, you know, they've been hauled over the coals more than once for the same thing, with a little teddy bear and cans that just look really friendly, you know, and kind of nice, and they don't have massive warnings on them, or like cigarettes have gone with pictures of, you know, lungs that are just knackered. I mean, that's where they're going, and they'd love that. I think the people who want these restrictions would love to have some really, you know, bad pictures on beer to make you think that you're gonna die from going anywhere near it. Which you know, there's a lot of people who say this is taking the fun out of life, right? Like it's kind of, beer should be fun. It should be convivial. It's a great product. But going back to Rollies, yeah, we can't do health, so we've so the brewery's partnered with Hyrox, who are like these amazing global fitness people, and we, being their official beer partner, the Hyrox people love the fact that it's got lower calories, 89 calories a can, 142 a pint, I think, which is, if we compare it to, so again, as a comparison, we can make a comparison with the calories. So we can say that the 89 calories are 35.8% fewer than Lost and Grounded, Helles, and Pilsner Urquell, that are both 4.4% beer. So we're allowed to make the comparison. This is a good one for those of you making notes. You can make direct comparisons to other products as long as there's two of them and that it's reasonable. So they're both 4.4, and therefore we can say, like for like, it's 35.8% fewer calories, which the Hyrox people love. And they also love the fact they can compete hard, party hard, and then go out for a 5K run the following morning. Now, we can't say that. They can, and they can do it through the community. So Hyrox community can say it. And we can get pictures of athletes with cans in their hand, drinking, looking awesome, you know, post Hyrox competition. And that's association. So we can make the beer, we can represent the fact that people who are healthy, conscious consumers who are health orientated will drink our beer, and we can feature those people as drinking it, but we can't allude or make any comment whatsoever to the fact that they're making that choice because of the lower calories or the B vitamin.
Okay, so there's two things I want to dive into just in that already. So you talk about, you can do the side-by-side comparison, like you say, 34% odd less calories.
Yeah.
When you present that, does it have to be presented as a very factual statement, as in it's you know, black and white? You can't say, you know, it's healthier because it is 34% less.
Yeah, completely. So we can't say, we can't use lower calorie, because again, that implies that there's a health benefit to having lower calories. And the real big irony for me with this is that if we're in an industry that needs to be regulated, and we're dealing with a product that is kind of inherently unhealthy, then surely you would want to encourage people to have products within that category that were better for you than others, right? You wouldn't want to just you know, to have it all demonized. You kind of go, well, if you are going to do it, then this is the way to do it. And we do that with moderation, and we do it with many other ways that do encourage people to make better choices, I think, when they're choosing alcohol. But the irony of Rollies not being able to be actually saying, we we're telling you, like, so we have to leave it up to the consumer. So you're absolutely right. We have to factually state very scientific levels of things. So an example, an interesting one that we got to chat with the ASA about, and we put 0 sugars on there, and they didn't like that, because that aligns to a kind of like a health thing. Like 0 is somehow a word that has an implication of better than more, if that makes sense. So we had to use it's actually 0.1 grams of sugar. So we factually state 0.1 grams, that's fine. And then the consumer can decide, right? They can look at it and go, well, okay, but we can't. So we could talk about how sugar's bad. We can talk about how hangovers are bad, but we can't link either of those to our products and say our products will be better for those things.
And so this then ties back into kind of the ambassador stuff, and using you mentioned Hyrox there, which makes perfect sense in terms of a fitness thing, and you can't relate to that. Are there other kind of industries that breweries cannot directly kind of go, this is associated with you or good for you?
I mean the low and no can, they're okay because they haven't got the alcohol. They can do isotonic, and they can do all kinds of things that are factually true. So they are isotonic drinks. They're really good for recovery. But what you don't know, and the reason why the low and no will never describe themselves as healthy, is because there's actually loads of sugar, like loads and loads and loads of unfermented sugar in the low and no, which, although because the alcohols that are in there, they're still lower calorie, they're not actually healthy. Like it would be very hard, I think, for a low and no to specifically state with the amount of sugar in it that it is healthy. So I think the category in itself, I mean, it's a very hard one to ever. I can't, and I don't think anyone would advocate. I don't think we'd advocate saying that the beer is healthy. It's not. It's inherently not healthy. But it is. If you're going to make a choice, and again, this is where we have to be very careful how we present the factual information, so that the consumer can make the choice themselves, but we can't lead them. And I think it's really interesting, because I think we're trying to be responsible. I mean, there's no sense that we want to hoodwink people into something that is going to encourage them to drink more. Again, for most people, the calorie saving would mean that they would feel a benefit through not having more calories than they need to, and that gets a personal choice. Others would say, well, the carbs, I don't want those, I don't want the sugars. And some people, will say, well, actually, I want to drink 6 pints and wake up in the morning and feel better. And they will, they do. But we can't say that in any way in an advertising way. And even, I'm not entirely sure I can say it on this, to be honest. I feel like I've got to be very guarded with what I say, because we cannot talk. Well, we can talk about hangovers, but we can't talk about the product being supporting those people who choose to drink beyond the government regulated amount of alcohol per week, which is, it's very nanny state. And there are those that would feel that we, as adults, that we don't need to have this. And we're not talking about bottles of spirits in the morning, right? We're not talking about people who have genuinely massive alcohol issues. I think we're dealing with ultimately people who want to have better performance in their life, who want to make choices that are going to be better for them. And I think the idea that within alcohol there is no discretion whatsoever to have any of those conversations. It's completely binary. It's like you're either wrong or you're right. That's it. And we we're treading very carefully, but it feels quite exciting, because I think there is already a low calorie market out there, and low calorie beers, but this technology, the smart brew technology, is so unique to create something that's actually really, really, really tasty and preserves the quality of the beer. But anyway, I'm going off brand. I'm talking about roadies a bit too much. I'm not talking about this stuff.
The pitfalls. And what I was thinking, coming back to, we said about you can't, say specifically designed for sports people and bits and bobs like that. But my mind flips back to the Yorkie campaign of old, it's not for girls.
Yeah.
Could a brewery pop up and go, this is beer for women, or this is beer for men these days? Or is that again a pitfall?
It's really tough. I think everyone who's tried it's kind of fallen by the wayside. Brewdog's Pink IPA, I remember for a while, that was just absolutely lambasted by the women that they were trying to attract. I think the general rule is be very careful, and I think going back to the kind of 4 rules that are there. Appealing to under 18s is a big one. So the idea of having language or imagery that would seem to be appealing to children is pretty clear. And I remember I was working with Beavertown at the time that they came up with their whole ray gun thing, and there was a big discussion with the Portman Group at the time around that imagery. That imagery was revolutionary. I mean, to actually put something fun on a can of beer when everything at that time was just really basic colours and nothing exciting, because the Portman Group and big beer had just really consolidated down to very simple looking products that don't do anything more than factually explain what it is really. And Beavertown and Craft came along and decided to take a lead from the States and put some really colourful stuff on the cans. And there was were those images, so cartoon images in themselves aren't bad. It's the context of those cartoon images, and they were said to be grown-up cartoons. So the idea of manga and the idea of imagery for adults can still be cartoon in its way, but it can't be like the teddy bear from Tiny Rebel, which they really didn't like, and ultimately Tiny Rebel had to. I think they did remove it in the end.
It's very much been pulled back. Like the teddy bear's still there. I spot it every now and again, but definitely not the forefront and center.
No, and I think that was the challenge. And I think I mentioned this before, but there was a brilliant bit of Portman Group, a recent ruling with a lady who bought Vault City Radler, and they came in a variety, I think pineapple, grapefruit, and lemon flavored. And the issue with the Vault City Radler was that the parent took it home, put it in their fridge. Their child opened the fridge, thought it was a can of soda, and drank it because it looked like lemonade or whatever it was. And it was upheld. It was essentially upheld to say that they, or at least it was discussed as to what it means in the home. The can has to clearly display that it's got alcohol in it. It has to make it very clear that, I suppose, for the purpose of being in a fridge in your house so your children know it's beer, right, is sufficiently, it's there to, as a reason. So if you're thinking about label design, it's not just about the point of sale. It's not just kind of making a kid, go into the beer aisle. And I think this happened with Beavertown. I think Beavertown got questioned for a kid going to the beer aisle in Waitrose and essentially taking a couple of cans of Gamma Ray off, thinking it was a soft drink, and the parent didn't realize until they got out that actually it was beer, because it did it look like it was there for children. Now one could argue the kid shouldn't have been in the beer aisle on its own and doing that in the first place, but and if it was a teenager, then good luck to him for trying to stick a couple of cans in your mum's shopping basket and hoping she doesn't notice. But obviously that's a joke. I'm just making that very clear. I do not condone teenagers trying to do that. But it's an interesting one when you think about that responsibility that we have as alcohol manufacturers. It's going to go to that point where if a child goes into the fridge at home, does it look like it's a can of soda, or does it look like it's a can of beer with what is a restrictive product? Let's not mess around. Alcohol is restrictive. We need to control it. But I found that to be kind of a bit bonkers, really.
Well, it's such a fine line, because I just think about the Vault City releases beyond the Radler, which is kind of quite a premium high-end look and feel. But then you've got Jungle Juice, which I've referenced on my own Instagram channel. It just looks a bit like Mbongo ultimately.
Yeah.
Or you've got like the crunchy stouts or the Willy Wonka inspired stuff, right? And it's the Radler that gets flagged. Like, where can a brewery go to be like, okay, this is safe, this is not safe? Is there an archive or a scent checker somewhere?
I think it is. I mean, it's down to, so someone has to complain. So this is not, they're not out there. They're allegedly not out there looking for reasons to call people in for this stuff. I think certainly back in the days of BrewDog, it felt like when they were really playing the game with the Portman Group, it felt like the Portman Group, almost had them earmarked for trouble. So it was very easy for their stuff to come through. But in theory, so it has to be a complaint, and the really interesting thing with that is if you are a B2B complaint. So if I was running another brewery and I wanted to complain about say Rollies or whatever, the ASA in Portman will not accept the complaint unless you have contacted the brewery directly and tried to work it out with them beforehand, which is a really interesting sort of get out of jail card, really. Well, I rephrase that. It's a very interesting way to try and avoid competitors just slagging each other off. Right,
dude,
so you could basically just do it
left, right, and centre.
Could you imagine? I mean, it would just be so easy, right? To just go, yeah, I don't like you, so I'm just going to complain. I'm going to always complain. And I think, although it's frustrating in some ways, because there are things that you do see and go, wow, I have no idea. That's really I want to complain about it. The only way you can do it is as a consumer. So if you're a consumer, you will get straight through, and they will take that straight off the bat. I mean, there isn't much of a process. They will consider it, and they will contact the brewery, and you'll go into a discussion with them. They'll ask you to defend why you think what you've done is right, and then there will be a conversation around, is it advisory? So are you going to take under advisement to change it, or are they actually going to regulate and say, no, we are going to uphold this and force you to have to do it? So there's quite a few steps before you are going to be forced to do something, and a lot of it, I have to say, my dealings with them have been very pleasant. They're nice people. They're not looking to be a sword of Damocles to try and shut things down. They want to be reasonable, but at the same time, there's a very strict code of conduct which is easily available from the ASA and Portman Group's website that everyone has to stick to, and they also have to go with the previous rulings. So for all those people who they have ruled in different ways, you have to abide by them, whether you like it or not, because if it's upheld, then you're unlikely to overturn it unless you've got a really good reason. But actually, there's a very interesting story on that one, which is to do with hooch. And I knew a bit about it, but I read up before coming on, and so anyone of a certain age will remember hooch back in about 1995 was one of the first alcoholic lemonades, and it originated from Australia, I think. Those and Two Dogs. Those are these. They came to the market, and it was bonkers because there was nothing in the regulations to really kind of say that you couldn't do an alcoholic lemonade. And obviously, the word lemonade is inherently a childlike thing, right? It's a thing that you'd kind of, if a kid goes, "Do you want an lemonade?" It's like it's a very child-friendly word. And they got away with it for a while, but then in '96. They got told that they had to change all sorts of things. They had like a comedy Lemon Man, they had lemonade, they had if you look back, it's like you could almost use it as an exercise in what not to do. And they quickly got sort of told to change the label, to change the positioning. And the product itself carried on for a while, but that whole category did eventually die, I think, because it was overregulated and they didn't want alcoholic lemonade in the market. Fast forward, hooch has come back a few years ago, and they did a reissue of the 1995 can, and it got complained about. Somebody complained and said, "Why this is outrageous." And all credit to the Portman Group. They went, "Look, times have moved on, right? And actually, no one's really going to think that this is like a proper for children." And it's worth going to read the adjudication, because they were very reasonable, and they allowed the cans to get out there for what was a limited release. It wasn't going to be going on forever. And I think that was really, again, these people are not bad people. They're not. I don't think they are trying to just be real killjoys and take the fun out of everything. But you just got to be really aware of not going over that line of appealing to under 18s, making sure that the clarity of the alcoholic nature is really clear. So if a 6-year-old goes into the fridge, it's not going to drink a Radler. You cannot emphasize high alcohol content as being positive. So there's no sense that you can go, it's going to get you really wasted. drink stronger. Like, so Special Brew, as an example, it might be the best tramp juice in the world, but the fact is, it's it can't talk about being stronger as being better. That's a big thing. And then irresponsible consumption. So you can't talk about people wanting, encouraging people to drink more. You simply can't do that. And the units are there, and drink aware, and all these things to wrap around the responsibility that brewers have to ensure that's not that those laws aren't broken.
What about, because those are kind of like the broad buckets of do not do. Are there any common like singular words or phrases that you see breweries using a lot where you're like, oh, that's probably a no-no? Like honest mistakes that they get involved in?
I don't think there's a lot of non-compliant stuff out there. I think everything is generally compliant because the rules are pretty clear. And I think the challenge here, and this is where the conversation is around for the brewers out there, is how, if you can't afford to go over the line and get done for all these things, where can you innovate? How can you do something? And I think that's where, on the rise of craft, so it's going back to Two Dogs and Alcoholic Lemonade. That was interesting. That was like the world change back in the 90s. And then if we look at 2010-ish with craft, it became, very exciting, to the point now where, we take wallpaper cans for wallpaper looking cans for standard. That's just what it is, because again, a geometric pattern and colors, you can't really go wrong with that, right? So, but for me, when I look at the cans on the shelf, there's not a lot that stands out. There's not a lot that's really, it's just a mess. Like it looks pretty, colorful and interesting, but actually en masse, it's really hard. So I think that, one of the things that we did with Rollies was actually remove all colored branding. So it's a monochrome can with just type, and actually we've got the gold award on there that stands out. But everything else, we decided to just go down the route of being very factual, which again was part of the scientific way that we wanted to present the product. But it's kind of interesting when you look at the anti-branding and look at how it works in cosmetics and it works in coffee shops and things like that. I think there's a lot of just typographical thing that's really quite strong, and that was a choice for us to kind of innovate in that area, I suppose. And there is a psychology behind it that if as soon as you put a color on, let's say it's green, someone's going to have an opinion about green, right? They're going to say it's ecological, or red would be dangerous, or yellow would be whatever, blues for boys, pinks for girls. So by removing all color, we actually make it suitable for everybody. So we find that when people engage with the cans, they impress their own sense of identity onto it, rather than us saying this is who we are. So rather than a Beavertown or a Brewdog or whoever going, this is our identity, and we want, are you part of our tribe? And you might be, you might not. Actually, it was interesting to kind of go and take away that sense of connection, but actually it made it very open. So I guess that's an example of taking almost all of this idea and just doing something different with it. But it is challenging, to know if you're in a category, you're going to want the beer to look like it's in that category, right? That you're of type. And if you go against it, then maybe people won't get it. And that's, again, commercially, play it safe, I guess, is the easiest answer.
I'm thinking, what can breweries do? Because, like I say, Rollies, you took a leap. You went semi-anti-brand. The Colonel, we could say, done something very, very similar. But if more and more breweries jump on that bandwagon, so they go from vibrant, colourful illustrations to typographic, very simple, we end up walking down what could be seen as a very sterile aisle all of a sudden if too many, lead that way. With the restrictions that breweries have in terms of language, labeling, appearance, where can they truly innovate and stand out and own a space and be different?
I mean, you've got to start with the product, right? So I think I'm not a fan of branding for branding's sake. So I think the idea of just trying to make a point of difference through the way you look it can work. I mean, I think it works really well with glassware. So I think that's an absolute winner. There's no doubt that. I mean, I'll see someone drinking out of a Stella Chalice or one of those San Miguel glasses, and there's a little part of me that goes, "Oh, that looks quite nice. Like that looks like I'd really like to drink out of that glass." And that's brilliant, for the big beers to have gone into glassware and created something that really does give a point of differentiation. So I think you're in safe grounds there, right? You can do a glass, and the Belgians, amazing, at it. The Germans, amazing at producing glassware that just absolutely encapsulates, everything that is that product. I think, and actually, in an on-sales environment, you're probably not going to see the can or the bottle. It's going to be poured into the glass, and that represents it. But I think if you kind of, I suppose it depends where you're looking at it. If you're looking at supermarkets, I think it's a real challenge because they're archetypes. It's going to be a 330 can, a 440 can, and it's going to be in a certain section that's going to want to look like it sits there. So, but again, a lot of brewers, we're not, for most of the people watching this, that they're all listening, they're not necessarily going to be in supermarkets. It's going to be in your local market. And I think the idea of in your tap room and choosing some glassware that's going to be great. We used to use Teku glasses back in my old bottle shop days, and we were one of the first people to get these beautiful Rastal Teku glasses that I think cost us like £2.50 each to make, and everyone nicked them, right? But then the number of times I saw people drinking their beer at home out of a Teku glass that had our branding on it because they loved it. It was a marketing spend more than anything else. And I think glassware's really often overlooked for having such a connection to someone's enjoyment of a product. You could take vintage champagne, pour it into a plastic glass, and drink it on a roundabout, and it's not going to taste the same as in a champagne flute in the south of France with the sun on your back, right? The place and the glass, the vessel is really important. So I think and logo and brand. I think if you look at something like Duvel, that I recognize a Duvel beer straight away because they've got a great font and the Duvel logo is really, really, really clear. And I could probably say that with, most breweries that I love, that I would recognize. They're recognizable, and I think that's that's definitely an old school way of looking at it. But I think it's got to be about you. And I think if you're in the tap room, you've got a lot more chance to impress upon people who you are. Supermarkets really hard. Bars really hard because again you just got a pump clip, right? Or you've got a keg badge that's just, it's not a lot of room there to express who you are, and generally bars won't want unusual glassware. Again, the British pub and bar, they're not gonna, you're lucky if you get a branded glass, the right beer in the right glass that's not some big conglomerate. So I think I'd go to glassware. I think, again, sidestep all of this stuff and find a glass that is absolutely like iconic and lovely, and makes your customer feel like they're drinking in more than just the liquid in the glass.
Mm-hmm. Well, interestingly, I was reading an article just before we started chatting because Jubel have just released their new glass, and it's got the kind of the spiral going down it, and it's ergonomic, it's friendly for stacking, but also it has that kind of alpine vibe to it. So I can see it. I mean, it's a heavy cost for smaller breweries, but I suppose things can be done with the artwork on the standard glass as well, can't it?
Definitely. I mean, we looked into doing a bespoke glass for Rollies, and you're right, it's not cheap. You make the mold, and then you've got to do a certain number, and it's tens of thousands that you're going to have to do, and it's not cheap. There's no doubt that to do a properly bespoke glass. But I think, again, if you look at the Beavertown glass, I mean, that's a nice glass, right? Everyone sees it. You see it on a table and you go, that's, someone's drinking Beavertown. You don't know what beer's in it. It could be Gamma Ray, it could be neck oil, it could be Lupul, it could be whatever it is. But that glass is properly brilliant. And that is just a 4-color print, I think, on a full wrap, and those, you don't have to, that's not going to cost too much money, but the innovation of Beavertown, I think, still feels like they're ahead of the game. Like I can't think of many other glasses of other breweries of kind of, I suppose, craft and not major breweries that actually has that identifiable character. And it's a standard Willy Becker glass. It's not, I don't think it's anything, it's not a bespoke, because again, they're making so many of them, they're going to be broken and stolen and whatever else. So it's trying to find something that's going to make your glass feel that, again, it stands out on the table when people are standing there drinking out of it. Hopefully it's going to work. But this comes down to branding and design and all kinds of things. So it's a completely separate conversation from the one we're having. But in terms of standing out, I think these rules are hard. Like I think to honestly to try and subvert them and believe that you're going to do something that's going to be clever. They've thought of a lot of it. You know, it's standard for a reason, and it's But at the same time, I think, you know, again, like we're trying to do with Roadies, there is opportunity, but we've got a product that deserves that has a reason to have that opportunity. So, you know, I'd love someone to brew a high strength beer and really challenge the not even seeing high alcohol as being good. I mean, we you know, we're a nation of we created barley wines and barrel aged beers, and high ABV was our part of what still defines British beer around the world. You know, everyone else is brewing barley wines except us. And it's almost, you know, again, trying to find maybe, you know, do a 1/3 of a pint kind of glass that's for a beer that's going to be really valued and you can charge more for. I mean, that would be doing something that's taking these rules and kind of, I guess, trying to go against them, but still winning.
I was just thinking, like, as we were talking about glassware there, and we talk about the rules and regulations, you can't say this specific thing. Is that like carte blanche on any kind of merch or POS associated with the brewery? Or can you say some things if it goes on the back of a hoodie or on glassware, but you couldn't put it on your bottle or your can?
It's kind of marketing. So as long as if it's a marketing statement and it's there designed to promote the product, then you're in trouble. You're in these waters. One thing I found out that was really interesting actually was when we were doing Roadies, we saw a low calorie beer in Waitrose, and on the shelf tag was some what we felt were outrageous statements, right? That were absolutely against everything we're talking about. The comparison wasn't like for like. It wasn't for, you know, the same ABV. It used language that, again, my eyes just went, no way. Like, there's no way they can be doing this. And this is when I found out that you have to go and talk to another company directly. When I went to the ASA and they came back and went, look, you need to go and talk to them, right? We're not getting into this, but we will tell you. And here's a fascinating little bit of knowledge for everyone to have. If you're in a shop, the point of sale in the shop is not regulated by the ASA. So the shelf tag on a supermarket or the shelf tag on a product in an environment that is either a bar or a shop, no regulations, none. Which is
an exciting opportunity.
It's really interesting, right? On the one hand, I call BS on it because it's like there's no way that's terrible actually, because that's the point where consumers are going to read this stuff and be taken in a way that's going to be a purchase. That's at the point of deciding, right? But in theory, you could put on a font in a bar, as long as the bar puts it on and you don't, right? As long as it's them doing it, then you're not liable, and they're not marketing. The ASA rules don't apply to those situations. So it was a really weird workaround for again, if you, I don't know, would it work in your own tap room? It would work in someone else's tap room. I don't know if you could get away with it on your own, because in theory, then you are the company marketing your own product. But certainly, if you're in another bar and they put a thing around saying, I mean, you could put anything down, right? I guess you could say this is going to make you really happy.
Live 10 years longer than anyone else.
Yeah, you could in theory, you can get away with putting anything in those situations, and that I thought was bonkers for the amount of regulation that we have as responsible breweries ourselves. It was like that was so I guess yeah, when it comes to, if you made the merch, if you made the glass, if you made it and you're the brewery, you are still under these rules. If someone else does it, then you're not. So that would be, again, the same thing with us with the High Rocks community. The High Rocks community can talk all they want about how they felt the following morning after drinking Roadies the night before. We probably couldn't repost it. We probably wouldn't put it on our socials, but we can let it sit there, and we could probably highlight it maybe, or point people towards the general thing. But it would be irresponsible of us to just reuse that, because you could subvert that, right? You could just pay people to do it and then say, well, we didn't say it, they did. But actually, I think that would be challenging if it was clearly breaking the regulations.
Cool.
But community, no problem. Yeah.
Can you be seen to encourage the community to create stuff like that, though? Like your wildest statement about my brewery, what have you got? Send it out there. Make a banner, make a flag, walk down the high street, crack
I
on.
think it would be very hard to integrate it into your marketing yourself with those quotes. I think consumer quotes are great, right? We've got, people who've so again for roadies to have someone who's literally just finished the high rocks. They've done an hour and a half, 2 hours of an unbelievable activity. They're sweating, they're full of endorphins. They've got a can or a pint in their hand. They're the happiest people in the world. We can quote them there, right? We could video that, and they could be there going, "Oh, this is the greatest thing in the world for me. There's nothing I want more than a roadies after a workout." And we could get away with that. However, if we said roadies, good for workouts, then we'd be killed, because that would I think, yeah, we'd be over the line. I find it hard to defend that if we genuinely try to position it as saying this is good for. So we can say, again, semantic the language, suitable for people with active lifestyles. We can get away with that. I've signed that off. I feel happy with that. If we said brewed for people with active lifestyles, we've crossed the line, because we're saying that we're deliberately making this beer for healthy people, and therefore the beer is inherently, for healthy people, suitable for me is a good enough caveat at the moment, that until someone comes along and says we're going to question it. I think that's the language we're using, and with those pictures of the High Rocks people, that fits quite comfortably for me, because they are a cross section of, they're a particular type of person within society that we're happy to focus on, but we're not excluding anybody else, and we're not saying that it's only for them and therefore it's completely inclusive just for them. So again, it's, if you're good at words, then you can achieve what you want to achieve without necessarily crossing the line. Again, 0.1 grams of sugar, not lower sugar. It sounds semantic, but actually it keeps you on the right side of not trying to be healthy. Again, it's like it's the H word, And the other thing I'll say that we try and do internally, we don't use these phrases internally. So there's no point saying, "Oh, well, we'll talk about it." We'll use health, because then you get used to it. And the last thing you want is a salesperson or somebody, going and saying something on the record and using phrasing that they shouldn't do. So, it's hard, and often you feel unnecessarily restrictive for yourself, but it's actually quite a good thing to get into if you are a brewery that's looking to be a bit edgy. Just use your safe language across all communications, emails, whatever. The H word is for us absolutely banned. Like we can't use it.
So I think this has been fascinating, Bud. I want to bring this to a close really with that kind of like your parting wisdom, that if a brewery's listening or they pick up on this later on down the line and going, "Yep, we're going to come in, we're going to be a little bit rebellious, we're going to be a little bit cheeky," what are the non-negotiables in your mind from what you've discovered that you really need to pressure test before you get it out there, so you've got a bit more of a plain sailing once that brand is in the market?
So I think one thing to remember is you're not going to be in breach until someone complains, right? So that is something to be aware of. So if you do something and you're going to do a small release and no one's going to know about it, and it's 50 bottles that are for some event you want to do, in theory, right, unless someone complains, you won't be in breach. And it would be, and although that's not, I wouldn't condone it. If you are thinking about that, I wouldn't worry too much. That's not gonna. If you're going to supermarkets, that's when they get really, really, really firm on ensuring that the average people are not, are not going to be misled by it. And then there's a sliding scale, I think, and it's kind of like how edgy do you want to be? Like, why do you want to be edgy? Is being edgy for edgy's sake not great? But if you've got a story you want to tell, if there's something that you want to do something that's around a charity, and you want to brew a beer for something that, I wouldn't say, necessarily for children, right? I don't think that would work. But if there is an element to it, then as long as it's defendable. So the big thing with, I think, with anything, any legal aspect, anything that's not just beer, if you've thought it through and you've got a defense, then most of the time, well, you're a great starting point. The worst thing is when someone will wrap you over the knuckles and you're ignorant, right? And that can be, I think that's where the Portman and ASA get very, very uncomfortable, is with people who are just ignorantly doing stuff without having checked the code and done things. Those that are making conscious choices, I mean, again, you can go and look at all. Definitely, I'd recommend everyone to go and look at the adjudications. They're really fun, and they're really clear in terms of what the transgression was, why it was a problem, and what the ASA and the Portman Group decided, and they're really thorough, and it's quite good sort of on the train or toilet reading. They're all quite short, only a couple of minutes each, and you'll learn some stuff, and it's so it's kind of working out what you really need to do to avoid those things that they're never going to climb down. Like you're not going to be able to do these things, and then there might be an area where you go, actually, I think we might be able to get away with this. I mean, Jubel and skiing. There's no way that Jubel are ever going to. There's no direct link, but if you ask anybody, they're going to go, "Oh, it's the Après ski bit," right? But are they directly saying that, or is it implied in some very clever language and imagery that they're using? And they've gone into the health sector as well, sponsoring fitness events and things like that. In itself, not a problem, but you have to be very careful how you align those things. So yeah, I think have fun, but be careful, I think would probably be my but please have fun. Let's have some innovation.
Andrew, Bud, this has been another fantastic chat. Thank you so much for your
Absolute
time.
Pleasure.
If people wanted to pick your brains, if they were like, "Oh, I think I've got this idea," do you know if this will fly, or you can maybe point them in the right direction of the place to check?
Yeah,
How can
100%.
people get in touch with you, mate?
Yeah, I love it. I used to do compliance back in my old television days as well for Ofcom. So I kind of the lawyer side of me loves this semantics with language and whatever. And I definitely am part of the world that want to get people to be as close to the wire as possible without going over it, rather than keep them super safe. So yeah, please, if anybody wants to reach out, ask me a question. I love it.
Fantastic. Best place is LinkedIn to find you, or
yeah, LinkedIn, absolutely. Send me a message on LinkedIn. My contact is all through Rollies, or drinksmaster.uk is also a little place that I stick my video clips and bits on, so you can go and find me there. But yeah, I'll be more than happy.
Fantastic chat. Well, everyone, thank you for those of you who've taken the opportunity to listen in today. A couple of comments came in as well, which is fantastic. Those of you listening in the future, this is Tim talking to you from the past. You rock, and I'll see you in the next episode of Branding for Breweries, everyone. Rock on. That's a wrap on this week's episode of Branding for Breweries. If you got something great from it, hit follow, like, and subscribe on your favorite streaming app. Or even better, leave a review, share it with your brewery pals, or get in touch, because I want to chat to you. Rock on!